When one door closes,
another one opens.
Welcome to the True North Lifestyle Podcast. Hey, I'm Joe, and here today with surprise guest Lee Libby.
Hey, what's going on? Sorry I missed the last one. Just spaced it a little bit.
That's all right. Rick Labby.
howdy.
And today we've got, he's not the head moose biologist, just the moose biologist for the state of
He's
Maine.
the only
Just
moose biologist
the moose biologist.
No,
Is Lee Kantar.
for the state of Maine.
Yeah.
Right.
Glad
sure.
you came on.
Yeah, Maine. Absolutely.
Lee made the drive up here today. We've got the Moose Lottery coming up, so we thought it'd be good to talk moose this episode. We talked to you. I've talked to you before in the past. Must have been 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, but I think probably some things have changed.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess a little catch up. It's fishing season right now, so
Fishing season it is, and
you've been fishing a little bit.
we've been fishing pretty hard all year. Every day I've had a minute we've been fishing, and I think we've netted over 200 salmon and about 130 trout and
Nice.
probably 35 lake trout.
Nice.
So, yeah, pretty good year. Last weekend, my wife landed a 5.5 pound brookie out of Moosehead.
Nice.
So,
Yeah, we got a couple. We got a new sponsor on board with us. Rick is
yeah, we
he's
got.
kind of an expert with their products.
So, this episode is brought to you by Northeast Troller. And they make a great line of lures and all kinds of other gear. So if you're looking for trolling gear for trout, salmon, they have a full line of fishing gear ranges from spoons in multiple sizes, patterns, flashers, dodgers, downrigger releases, fish holders, live bait rigs, much more. So go check out their products by clicking the special affiliate link in the video description or use promo code TTN at checkout for your 10% off on your order. Also, folks, if you're buying or selling land, looking for a house or camp, or just a vacation rental, Gary Williamson is your guy. Western Maine Real Estate Guide. So,
So what's your favorite Northeast Troller product?
I've got a copper and red spoon. It's like a blood red on one side and copper on the other, and totally copper back. And I think that's probably my favorite lure to troll. And I troll that lure about, I shouldn't give this secret up, but about 2.2 miles an hour seems to be the magic speed. You know, that gives you the best action on it. The trout like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the sponsorships are a little bit new to us, and we're
Yeah.
slowly adding them. And like in this case especially, I mean, these are products that Rick's been using for a long time.
I've been using Northeast Trollers for about 3 years now, and they got a really fantastic assortment of lures. If probably my favorite store to go into would be Indian Hill. They've got a massive wall of Northeast Trollers, and then Moosehead Trading Post in Newport, he's got a lot of them. So those are the two spots that I'd recommend if you're looking for Northeast Trollers.
Excellent. And so although it's fishing season, I know moose is on a lot of people's minds now with the lottery coming up.
Yeah.
Big deal in the state of Maine.
Big deal.
Maine Moose Lottery.
Yeah, it is.
Am I going to get drawn this year?
We're all looking at Lee.
How
You
many
pull the
times you
numbers,
get
right?
that question? Huh?
Oh, I'd never had that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a first.
Yeah, I mean, it's Lee, I know following what you do, and I mean, we're all pretty familiar with the moose herd, and as much as we can be from what we do, our livelihoods somewhat revolve around it, our hobbies revolve around it. And I know it's got to be a tough job, but I mean, I guess I'd like to start first on how long you've been at it and how you ended up as the moose biologist for the state of Maine.
That was hard for you to get out, wasn't
See,
it?
I didn't say head moose
Jeez.
biologist. Did good.
How long I've been in this job, or how long I've been alive, or what?
How long has moose been your your main focus?
Well, I've been with the department for 20 years, and I took over a moose in 2008. So,
And and in those 20 years, what? Just explain the change you've seen and
I'm a lot grayer. as you can
what's
tell,
caused
yeah.
the change.
Yeah. Oh, the change in the moose?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, everything nowadays goes back to the saga of the winter tick. That's for sure, and that started identification of that for us when we started our research that we've been working on now since 2014. I don't know about you, but as you get older, time really moves.
Oh,
So,
there's
Sure does.
no
know,
question about that.
yeah, we got another capture year coming up, and I have to always think about it and look around the room, but I'm like, 2026 is the year that's coming up, and we get another capture round to support actually the adaptive hunt part. But regarding time, it's like we started in 2014, and then we'll be over 1,000 animals that we've put GPS collars on by the time we do that this January, and that's a pile for what it takes to get that kind of work done.
Yeah.
And how many do you have collars on right now?
Well, the work we're doing right now is since 2020, when we kind of changed over from our survival, adult cow-calf survival, to the just looking at overwintering calves. And when I say calf, it always confuses people, because a calf for us, capture-wise, is a animal that's 8 months old, right? So everybody thinks you're collaring calves, meaning May-born calves, little guys, but no, these are 8-month-old. A calf in January is 400 pounds, or should be 400 pounds at least. What was your question?
Well, it started from
Yeah.
just the change in,
Yeah. Okay. The change,
and
yeah.
and then I asked you how many you
Oh,
how
how
many
many are on
actually
right now?
have
Yeah,
collars
yeah.
that are still alive out
Yeah.
there.
So since we've been doing this work looking at calves in support of the adaptive hunt, and kind of comparing and contrasting for what we did since 2014, because we've worked in 3 management zones or units, and we're in District 4 now, so we're comparing what we see now relative to what we saw in District 8 and District 2 over the years since we started. But we put in about 70 collars, and then whoever survives, the collars are still on. So right now I think there's 21 out there. All the collars we put on now are attached with surgical tubing, so they're meant to dry, wet, and then they rot and they fall off. So they all
Okay.
come off.
Yeah.
So we're just waiting on that because,
What's the how long do they usually stay on? How long does that take to rot off?
it's just kind of a fun fact for us. It's kind of a crazy thing, which is there's a tremendous amount of variability. Usually they're coming off in the summertime and then this fall, because we got to put them back out in January. We're using the collars over again.
Okay.
But right now I got a collar laying in the woods that I was going to go pick up last week, but it's up by Ross Lake, and that's a collar from 2024. So we captured in 2025, and it's like, why is that collar still on that moose? It doesn't make any sense. And then it finally popped off. So that's just a wicked outlier.
You captured it
In
in
2024, yeah, and it just came off. So it's
Okay.
over a year and a half.
Yeah, year and a half, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find that the most susceptible moose are the calves to the ticks?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's there's no question about that. And again, this is based on our work since 2014, and from 2014 to 2020, we put collars on adult cows.
Right.
As part of that research, and we had one bad year of mortality, and the rest mortality was pretty light. But so it's all relative to the size you are, and then your tick load. So we've done, and again, it's interesting to put together some of the science part and kind of play with the numbers, which is usually not my favorite thing. I actually like to be out in the woods. I know that surprises people, but
Yeah.
I spend as much time out as I can, but we can do a lot of predictive type of things based on all the numbers we've had, because we've done so many. So one of the
Right.
predictions is, if you take your January capture, this is live weight, right? It gets hoisted up by the helicopter, takes a few seconds, and then we do a tick count on that. And so you have those two measures. So a lower tick count and a higher body weight can offset So if you're 400 pounds and you got, a ton of ticks on you, but you're 400 pounds and you have a few ticks, your chance of survival is going to be higher, right? So then do that for an adult, right? Instead of being 400 pounds, let's say you're 800 pounds and you have the same load of ticks on. It's just, it just follows, because what the ticks are doing, of course, is they're removing blood, right? And
so they get anemic.
Yeah, well, these calves from January is likely their high point, their best condition, and then they're losing 1 pound every single day. And what's amazing about that, it not only is the loss, and again, I say this is amazing in a bad way.
They're losing the weight naturally or because of the ticks?
Because of the ticks.
Okay.
And because, and the thing is, it's so methodical when you look at the numbers every single year, and the weight loss from capture in January to whenever they die, if they die in March and April, it's just the same every year, the same pattern. And so it's pretty impressive. But people also have to understand, and not everybody understands, that wildlife is they're not human, right?
Yeah.
And so people are like, the poor moose during the wintertime. It's like, well, moose have evolved so that when all the green stuff goes away, they're eating browse all winter. Now, they're not eating the same amount of food that they eat in the summertime, and they're relying on the fat, just like deer, that they've stored up in the late summer and the fall, and they mobilize those fat tissues over the wintertime to make it to green up. And it's not boo-hoo, it's just that is life as a wild animal. Now, if you're a moose and you're going through winter and you slow down, some of these guys, their home ranges become really tiny little things. That's why people will be like, I don't see any moose, in the wintertime or whatever. It's like, well, if a moose has a really, really tiny home range, if you're not there, then you're not going to see a moose. And, they're feeding on browse and ruminating and all that stuff, not going far, and they're holding out until better days. But if you pile a bunch of ticks on you and you're losing weight, then you're really dropping your weight.
Really going downhill.
So, you see 25-30% weight loss between live capture in January and if one dies.
And what I know, when I saw you, we talked a little bit at the Sportsman Show, and at that time, I think the tick kill was really heating up. What did it end up being?
So this year we lost 71% of our collared animals. Oof. So the understanding there is that we had 72 moose collared, because usually it's around 70, but we buffer that. And so that was, I think, 51. We lost 51 of those.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you try to spread that out so it's equal all over the state?
The capture?
Yeah.
No, it's just in District 4.
That's it.
And then that's it, yeah. That's, that area is big.
Yeah.
And this capture work was to support the adaptive hunt. And the adaptive hunt is only half of that unit, which is another thing that gets waylaid in translation, which is we took a unit that's 2,000 square miles, divided it in half, and upped the permits in one half.
Yep.
So we kind of have an experiment and control area. When we do the capture, we captured moose throughout that unit. And if the way the capture works is that we have an excellent capture crew, capture pilot from New Zealand who comes here. Obviously, they work in the U.S. and they work out west quite a bit. They do a ton of work in Wyoming.
Yeah.
But it's all about efficiency. And so we try to break up District 4 into 4 quadrants. So it's kind of, you can picture northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast. And you try to spread that out evenly, but you're not gonna tell the capture crew, hunt this area until,
right.
You got to produce. You got to produce.
Yep.
Whenever we do capture work, it's all about efficiency.
Yeah.
So we can go down in the southwest part of District 4. Basically you take Baker Lake, and then go to that southwest corner down to the Golden Road, and you can catch moose all day. You could do it all there, like bam. But we're spreading it out, and as the woods grow up, as the moose will thin out, but they are there.
Yeah.
I mean, we do helicopter surveys. I've been doing helicopter surveys with the Maine Forest Service since 2010-11 winter. And there's moose in thick woods as well, but you're not going to, when you're going out there and looking for them from the air, you can spin pretty hard, and then you see this little moose go flying, and you're not going to be able, in our case, classify that animal. So
right. You've explained that to me a little bit, but if you could go over how that process is for counting, because I'm sure a lot of people are interested in that.
Well, we do 2 different surveys. We have traditionally done 2 different surveys to do moose. And, the first thing is to step back and say, to count anything, try counting your fingers, right? And we always joke with foresters because, they're counting trees, but trees don't move around much. But moose do. And even though they're big and dark and fun to look at, there's also in the life of a moose and the season of a moose through a year, they're doing different things. It's a difficult thing, and there's a margin of error in it. Nobody's ever going to make a count of any wildlife species unless there's only 5 left and be able to count them. There's always a margin of error, and and then there's time and money and resources, and so that's the way it is. And so we started in the beginning of when we joined up with the Maine Forest Service, of doing 2 different types of surveys. When we do our counts, we're running transects in the sky right above ground. So we're 200 feet above the ground. And 200 feet above ground is, 50 feet taller than a big white pine tree.
Yeah, it's low.
And
you're down there.
And the beauty of the flights that we do is that we borrowed it from a researcher in Quebec, and then my friend who doesn't work for DNR in New Brunswick anymore used that in New Brunswick, because we're talking about a spruce fir system. And so the issue is, and you're a pilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
The issue is, right, when you fly, you got this thing in your way. You got a thing called a wing, and you can only slow down so much. And so a helicopter is a game changer, and you see a lot more. And so we run these transects that are 25 miles long. We space them out about a kilometer apart, mixing my measurements here. And we do 7 lines, 25 miles long, which describes a 100 square mile area. And
you're happy when you wake up on those mornings to go to work, aren't you?
That's
got to be fun.
To be honest with you, the running a transect, even in a helicopter, is mind. It plays with your brain. It's really, and I was talking to somebody else about this with brain function, but it's really exhausting. And so we're sometimes, some of our blocks are north south, some are east west, and so some blocks you'll have like the sun raining in on you, and you get the rotor, so you get this kind of light flashing at you. Yep. And the thing is, when we're flying 200 feet above ground, our area that we locate moose in is only 200 feet. Now think about this, which is you're flying these transects that you've marked down on a map back in your office, and then you go out in the woods and you fly, and you're only looking at 200 feet, and yet you see these animals. And of course, when you're 200 feet above ground, it's basically a flushing survey, right? Like people do that for grouse. You flush it, and obviously if a moose or a deer, let's say, is just standing there, they're very difficult to see, especially a deer, and they can stay right under a tree. But if something's moving and it's single, that's great. And if there's 2, it's really good. So we do this. This is a mark recapture model that we do. So we have 2 people on the same side of the ship seeing moose, and all that matters is that we're both seeing some moose. Sometimes the one guy sees more than the other, and you are able to come up with an estimate for that area and extrapolate that out to the whole. So we do. So that's one survey. We do a totally separate survey to classify bulls, cows, and calves, because it's one thing to know we have X number of moose here, but then we want to know how many of those moose are bulls, how many are cows, and how many are calves. Because traditionally for our management systems in the state of Maine, so we've always had a management system and assessment of a species to guide what we do. So we don't just sit there and come around and go, hey, what do you want to do? You want to put out 2 permits or whatever? There's a whole system, including a tremendous amount of public consultation. And we've been doing this for decades to figure out what do the people of Maine, how do they want us to manage these species for? And then that eventually gets distilled down into a management system. So you're doing things on a regular basis with all these inputs. and it gets more and more complex. But
So how does it change when you're counting bulls, cows, and calves?
from the transect survey,
Yeah.
we fly moose habitat when we classify, because you can talk to biologists any state, whatever critter it is. We could go out and do a deer survey to look at bucks, does, fawns, if we see enough, and you got to see a lot of animals to get these ratios, because when you look at the numbers, not to bore anybody, but for us, for moose, we figured out mathematically that if we do 100 moose, and of course you're trying to do it efficiently. You can't be out there spinning your wheels all day. We get a bull cow to calf ratio, and if you did 150 moose, that's not going to really change that. You'd probably have to do way more, and that's not worth the time, really, because in reality, if you say you have 60 bulls per 100 cows, or you have 70 per 100, what does that mean to anybody? We have a threshold that we want to manage each management unit for. And the calf to cow ratio is interesting because it tells us we can do some other stuff like modeling the population, all that, but it tells us some important things we want to know. And, remember, we're flying in the wintertime when there's snow out there on a day where it's calm. We with the transects, it can't be above 10 miles per hour. We don't want any precipitation. And if you've ever been in the state of Maine, you might go over to Rangeley, and or I should say this the opposite way, because I had this really not fun day over there, which is I could go over to Oakfield and the weather's great, and then I fly to Rangeley and all hell's breaking loose. And we actually got caught in a snowstorm, which is very unpleasant, in a helicopter. We actually had to go fuel over in Berlin.
Okay.
And then we came back, and we were working out of the Rangeley airport, the municipal airport there, and that sucked. Being in the snowstorm, we were getting out of there. We were going back home, but
Yeah, still.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this year, if you're looking for calm days, this past winter was not one to find one. It was brutally windy this winter.
We got a little wider window parameters for flying the classification flights, because we can go wherever. When you're in a transect, it's like you're on the transect and you can't deviate. We've only had to blow off a transect line once, and the funny part of that was I think we were north of Baxter, maybe we were in zone 5. I don't know. We were in this unit, and there was this cloud ceiling was a little bit ugly, but we're flying, and your head is looking out on the transect. You're never looking up, so you don't know what's in front of you. It's like trying to drive down the road and not looking, and I kind of start seeing like snow flying going by me, and I'm like, what the hell? And I hear our pilot go, "Hey, we got to get out of here." And so then I look up, and I'm like, it's like, oh my God, it's like black. It's like blackness. And then we had to scurry down through the park, and then we have to, fly around a cell, and it's
Right into a blizzard.
But the beauty of a helicopter is you could go on the ground if you had to.
You
whereas
could,
a plane makes it a little tougher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't, reduce my stress. when you
Right,
say that
right.
honestly, but yeah.
Right.
So you have that number of bulls, cows, and calves, and then obviously you can just use your extrapolate with your winter kill of the calves to figure out kind of where you're at. Is that how it works?
Yeah, and and there's other inputs if we want to get down to real brass tacks. The thing that's complicated that with moose, or maybe is frustrating to people, is that we have excellent science to know that winter tick, unfortunately, right now in the last 15 to 20 years is driving moose population, right? But the moose population has been big enough over time that even when you start to see it decline because of the loss of calves and reduced productivity from cows, then you get a bump up. So, okay, we had 71% mortality. And again, that's 71% mortality on collared animals in one unit. And what I say to people is, we're going to be conservative. You're not going to have that data on every single unit in every part of the state. I mean, come on, you can't do that. And you get the best available data you can do. And so you're going to say, well, likely worst case scenario is 71%. So that's where we're going to work off that, because it's really good stuff. We don't have to borrow that from Alaska or Wyoming or Newfoundland. This is data that we collect in Maine. So where was I going with that?
I asked you about the how the population translates that you
Oh,
extrapolate.
okay. Yeah. So the thing about moose is that if you have winter tick driving things, and winter tick is directly, we believe, related to density of moose, then you wanna reduce the number of moose out there. And some people think, you shoot one moose and you're changing the population. That's just not true. You're shooting 2,500 moose, and that's not changing the population. And even with our increased harvest in District 4, and I can just see people going, what's the word, apoplectic, going crazy.
This is the part I wanted to get down to, because
even with
this is
increased
the part that I
harvest,
guess everyone's fired up.
Well, because, again, okay, what we observe out there is very, very important. It's the basis for science. But you need additional information that you got to test, and you got to understand to figure out the complexities of things. So it's like, we see things, and this is what it looks like, but we got to look at other things, and data's got to drive what we do. And we work pretty hard at it for the last 15 years, and with all this work we do.
Yeah, whenever I see, and I just know I love moose, and I love shed hunting, and I love moose hunting and everything else. You obviously learn things about the animal when you're in the woods, and you have your own opinion on what the population is doing. For instance, it was all over this year how many calves people were finding, and it seems like, from what I heard from different people, Zone 1 got hit really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that because Zone 1 had a lot of moose, and like goes back to what you said, that ticks hit them hard up there? But down here in Zone 8, and I don't know if my sample size is good. I only found 3 winter kill this year when I was shed hunting, but I was shed hunting a relatively small area, so it's hard to say whether that means anything. I know a lot of guys over in the western part of the state found a lot, but these are guys that are in the woods every day. Every day.
I heard that too. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, since 2006, we've been looking at winter tick on the backs of bull moose in October. And this is going to sound wonky too, but when my predecessor started looking at winter tick, because we knew winter tick was having an impact, and people who spend time in the woods were letting us know that they're going into camp, or a forester working, or some shed hunter named Joe, I don't know. And we're seeing a bunch of dead moose, right? So you need to test. Well, what's going on? And you say you found 400, and then somebody else says they said 4. So what is the real number in between that? So you got to do the work with GPS collars and everything else.
Yeah.
So again, it's that what we see out there and the level of mortality, it varies. But what my predecessor did is started to do this tick survey, this index to how many ticks are on animals by looking at bulls, because in 2006, that was the latest season we had. Because ticks are getting on the moose, from the end of August or early September all the way till we get really nasty weather and the snow flies.
Looking for a host.
Yeah, so
right.
So that point in time was the latest hunt, and October is one of the only times where we have more actual biologists from around the state working at check station. We want the biologists to do the tick counts, looking at larval ticks. And so we've seen this, now that we've done it since 2006, we see how that changes every year, those numbers. And then when we started doing our work with the calf work, we knew what our mortality of calves, overwintering calves, was come spring. So then we're able to pair up those two things. What's the tick count, even though it's on a bull? And what does that mean for calf count? And we established a strong relationship. So we know, and this is going to even sound wonkier, that if we do, in October, we do 4 different areas. We do the neck, we do the ribs, the rump, and the shoulder. And we do 4 transects, 10 centimeters long. So there's 16 transects on the moose. We part the hair. People have seen us do this. We look at all the ticks there. We count them up. If there's a total number of larval ticks of 37 larvae, that sounds like, that's going to be bad, okay? And that's going to predict that we're going to lose at least 50% of our overwintering calves the following year. And so you got to think, a moose is a big animal, and we're looking at 10 centimeter, just the lines, just the crease. And still, those moose that are out there alive, the ones that didn't come into harvest, are still acquiring ticks until that shuts down. And so we look at ticks on moose when we do our capture. We look at ticks during mortality. We spend a lot of time with ticks, and we have a really good way to predict. Not exactly. I have a writer who's been asking me this, and it's like, okay, come on, it's greater than 50%. And then when we see spring mortality like this, 71%, there's your number. But if we were just doing the fall tick counts, we'd be able to say, well, it's going to be bad or it's going to be fine. And 3 years ago, we only lost 8% of our calves. So we had 92% survival.
Wow.
And that gave a bump up across the place.
So what was what are the natural factors that affect whether the ticks are going to be bad or not? In other words, what do we need to knock them out aside from knocking the population down?
That's the $1 million question, which is that we're looking at, and you got to understand too that like the Canadians and everything, people have been looking at winter tick and for decades, and a professor in Alberta wrote a book on it called White as a Ghost. It's really good stuff. Our friends in Quebec are doing a ton of work, very similar to us, or we're doing work similar to them. The problem is that the winter tick lives for 1 year. It's not even a year. Okay, they're egg masses right now. Moose don't have any winter ticks on them. The females have laid their eggs. They're in the duff. Then those egg masses, you could have 1,000 right here. They break out in the fall. They climb up on vegetation and wait for something to come by. They get on the moose. They live on the moose the whole winter. They don't give a I was going to say crap. I don't know if I can say that.
Yeah,
they don't give a crap if the winter is 40 degrees out or if it's minus 40. They're living on the moose. There's no impact. What is impactful is when the larvae are up on the brush trying to get on a animal, what are the conditions? And so every day it's warm out is another day. So if on October 1st, this moose is walking through the woods and it has a bunch of ticks on it, and then it's shut down because the weather sucks, that's all the ticks that moose has on it, and it goes through and it has an easy year. If the weather continues to be mild, every single day that moose is walking through the woods and picking up another pod, and getting more and more on them. And so University of New Hampshire, my mentor Pete Peekins, when he was the professor there and had all kinds of grad students, they pulled hide from calves, split the hide in half, froze. They basically counted ticks on a grid system, and that's where they came up with they would count from 30,000 to 90,000 ticks on a single animal. Wow. And so you'll see that, and you've seen this before, certainly for us on a mortality, we'll have trouble. We'll get on a moose, and we'll mention this, that we got this film with Hunting ME coming out in August, but there's a part of that film where we're on doing a necropsy, and one of the biologists I work with a lot out of Greenville, Scott, is explaining, it's like, you see this part of the moose here, the hair is normal, right? You can fluff the hair or whatever, and then he goes up towards the shoulder and it's like, it's all sticky with residue. It's because there's so many ticks on that feeding on the moose with blood, and they're very sloppy feeders, so they get there's blood coming out of the sides of their mouth parts, but when they defecate or whatever, they don't digest the hemoglobin, so you see these black, like, crusty blood and feces all over the thing, and it's like you can't make a part on it, and it's just bloated, engorged female winter ticks everywhere, and wherever they can. And so anyways, so
I was going to ask you, Lee, to explain to people how the ticks hang in pods. I don't think everybody understands that.
So these, and that's the thing that, and thanks for saying that, because where I was going with this, I don't know where my brain is, but is that because the ticks only live for a year, there could be some big environmental event that comes in that actually wipes out a bunch of the ticks in one day, right? And changes that so when the female lays 1,000 eggs, and she drops off a moose, she can't go far because she's huge. You've seen them before. They just get these little legs sticking out. She lays her eggs. She dies, thank goodness, and the males die. And all those eggs are laying there in a big, pod, so to speak. We know that even if we get really, really dry weather that goes into the duff, that can kill some of them. But because it's a pod, like a ball of eggs, let's just say, for better for worse,
right?
It's just eggs may dry out on the outside and die, but the inside all survive. And so they break out, they become larvae, they crawl up to this branch over here, and then they're waiting there all together. And so you'll have a bunch on one stick, you'll have a bunch on the other, and they sense the heat of the moose coming by, or it could be a deer or whatever, and then one, touches it, and they all go like a barrel of monkeys because they're all kind of interlocking with that. So then you get all those ticks on them. And you guys have probably ran into this being in the woods where you get, it looks like little red mites, but they're actually winter tick larvae, and you're like, what the hell is that? And
Right.
and so then on the moose, take a blood meal, molten in nymphs, take a blood meal, molten to adults, but they're susceptible to crazy events. But the biggest thing is when is the winter weather coming in the fall? How soon is that coming? And then, there is some impact in the spring. The problem is that we initially thought that when the ticks fall off in the springtime, if they fall into snow, they'll just die. But it's like a horror movie, right? They can't move and they can't do anything. They're just suspended. And then when conditions get better, they're like, oh, hey, how's it going? And they just do their thing. So they're not, it doesn't seem they're impacted much by how much snow is out there. If there's no snow come spring and the heat and everything dries them out, that can be a good thing. They can withstand being submerged in water. So it's like, so there's tick people, but it's complicated.
Why do they not affect the deer the same way they affect the moose?
Well, so the theory there is that white-tailed deer have been in North America way, way longer historically than moose. Moose came over on the land bridge from whatever you want to call it, Russia, that area. And so it's like, they talk about an arms race when two things live together. You got a parasite and you got a host, and they figure things out. So like deer, they believe are, there's a term for this too, the type of grooming that they do. So they groom all the time.
Yep.
Whereas like moose, I was just thinking about this the other day, have to be triggered by something. They're not naturally grooming. So you got all these animals, probably like snowshoe hare too, that are always grooming themselves and getting things off. We'll find a few ticks on a deer once in a while, winter tick that is. But the moose, they get on the moose in the fall, and the moose are like, yeah, they don't know that. And then by the time they molt it into a nymph, the tick molted into a nymph, then the moose is like, there's something going on here. And then they start, and they can do a fair job. They are dislodging ticks because they use their rear legs, they use their mouth, they use their tongue, and they rub up against things. Yeah, they use trees. You guys have seen this quite a bit.
Yeah.
But there's areas they can't get to, and the problem is by the time they really recognize this, the larvae have taken their blood meal, which is probably not significant, but then the nymphs are a little bit bigger. They take a blood meal. That's starting to have some impact. Now it's during the time of year in January where now they're starting on their downhill physiological plane, and then by the time the adults are feeding, then it's a horror show.
No way to get rid of the ticks, though.
No, I mean, we've gotten this, and we've probably talked about this on the last podcast, and I've testified in front of the legislature and all this, but you're not going to spray the woods, and people will be like, well, they're spraying the woods for spruce budworm.
No, I saw on Facebook, Lee, someone brought it up, and they said all we got to do is shoot them with paintballs.
Yeah,
and so there's been all these things, and look, I mean, I hate to even say this because this is the type of stuff that gets misconstrued, but the researchers in Quebec actually decided. So we were looking at, with our research, what is the cause of death. So we knew winter tick was a player, but you got to go out there objectively as a scientist and be like, okay, well, let's make sure we're looking at everything. So that's when we go in necropsy, take them apart head to toe, take samples to the Orono, et cetera, humane. So we did our due diligence. Quebec took another stance where they decided they were going to take a bunch of moose that they'd catch in one area, divide them in two, and treat some of these with something that would kill ticks.
Yep.
And now remember, this is a live moose in their hand. And so the first time they did it, they put a topical thing on them, and it didn't do anything. So then they rebooted. They did it again, and they did the tick stuff where we used to do this with our dogs, where you'd part the hair and put kind of an oily thing on that.
Yep.
So they're parting the hair of the moose. They're putting this on the moose, and then they gave them an oral, what's called an acaricide, something that kills ticks. So two treatments, and that worked for those moose. Okay, so people are going to be like, oh my God, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Okay, well, so for us to catch 70 moose, right, by helicopter, number one, it's dangerous for people to do this work, it's a tremendous cost.
Yeah.
And we do 70 moose, and we got a great crew that does this, and if we don't get into snowstorms or whatever, we can do that in about a week, and that's 70 moose. You treat 70 moose for ticks like that's going to do nothing.
Right.
Zero.
Yeah.
And look, the North Maine woods, the stronghold of moose in this state is 10 million acres. A moose ranges 10 to 12 square miles on a good day, on a good month. These are not practical things. People want government to do good things for everybody and be efficient with the money that they have to, do, right? And so at some point you sit there and you go, okay, yeah, well, could you treat a moose? You could, but it's not my dog. My dog is an issue. I called my vet.
Yeah.
We got an appointment next week. I'm just being straight about that.
Right.
That's a non-starter. You're not going to be able to do that.
Bottom line is it going to make a difference? No.
And if there's something like what they use, for whether it's spruce budworm, and you can see all the conspiracy theories out there already about this stuff, but there's a biological treatment for black flies, right? There's got to be a solution out there that's something that you could put out there, let's say, on a huge area that's not going to kill off everything else. And people always forget in Maine that Maine is private lands. We don't have big public lands here. And so, landowners are critical to everything we do, very important. And they've been important to us that we have so many moose. So without them, So
It's interesting you mentioned the spraying for the budworm, because even though, for people that don't know, it's called spruce budworm, but it really affects the fur the most. But I was just talking to Thomas Coleman the other day about the spraying, and it went really well. They just did a large area up in northern Maine, and so naturally was the first thing I think of is there some, it's a matter of developing something that is only, because that spray for the budworm is only
For the
supposedly harmful to the budworm, but you can also see if they don't do that spruce budworm spraying, how that will affect the moose, because that's the winter feed for the moose. So if we lose all of our fir trees, how does that affect down the line?
Right.
What happens to our moose, which would be pretty tough.
Right. And again, you remember what I said here with the Quebecers, which is, an oral treatment as well as a topical, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you're handling a moose, and
yeah, I mean, that part, one of the things, because you see all these, it's obviously a big debate, and my stance on it is I'm going to side with the people that dedicate their lives to it and know a lot more than I do about it. There's some things that seem like common sense that you just explain why it doesn't work, obviously, which is kind of common sense, that it's just a numbers game. One of the things that you see a lot is going in and putting salt blocks with something to kill them and put them in the winter yards, which...
Look, again, I'll be the first one to say I don't know much. But, when we started our work in 2014, I had also realized that, if we want to maintain a certain number of cows out there, for instance, we can't, if we lose 5 cows, we can't call New Zealand back to, net gun. We don't use any, we don't drug the moose when we do the net gunning. But you can't, call them back to do that. So we had to we had to use our own ways. So we tried, we can do some things that other people can't do. And so we did some roadside work in District 8 and everything like that. We could never get close to a calf, and I'm not a ninja or anything, but we could see, we wound up doing 2 at night roadside. We darted 2 cows, and that was not going to be efficient. That's not a way. You can't get that close, and over time moose have become much more skittish from roads. We tried baiting, using all the information we had, and it's just like, no, it just wasn't working. None of that was working. The only effective technique that we have beyond hiring the helicopter crew is catching them in the water, and we were pretty effective with that. So, but that's only in some areas where you got, just the right place.
What about taking effect that the stress level between the human and the animal
Yeah.
also puts a lot of stress on them, especially when they're covered with ticks. So
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah. So it's,
All right, so the idea of, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the idea of the adaptive hunt is obviously to lower the population of moose in a certain area to see if we can lower the ticks, because the tick need the host.
yeah.
And if they don't have that host, then they eventually die off.
Right.
So I guess the adaptive hunt, we've all seen and heard about the horror stories of people riding around for a week and not seeing a moose. And
Right.
It seems to me that it really isn't even dropping the population.
Mhm.
The numbers of moose that are getting killed. I mean, am I wrong on that, or is it,
Well,
is
so-
it effective?
So this will be the 5th year, and we had it slated for 5 years, and so we're going to hold off judgment on everything, until we have time to, number one, have our 5th year, and then all the data that we collect with it. So obviously, we look at all the harvest data we get from these animals. We've always asked hunters for all the cow hunts to bring in the ovaries, because that's the most critical part to look at productivity, because then we can compare those numbers. Okay, we got all these ovaries from the moose from the adaptive hunt, and we can look at that relative to the other areas. But we need sportsmen and women to pony up and do that. Whenever we do our aerial surveys, the priority, the first part of the year is always District 4. We go fly District 4. We've collared moose now for, I think it's 7 years, or if this is going to be our 7th year, to look at mortality and cause of mortality as well. So even though we know what cause of mortality is, we still go in there by, truck, snowmobile, snowshoes, and take that moose apart and look at it. And so we really got to tally that stuff up and do an assessment of that after this fall's hunt is concerned. So we know that with the adaptive hunt and the bigger cow numbers, we've increased harvest. There's no question about that, and so that's been a good thing. But it's been a challenge for people, and we've had some really good hunters out there too. But it's just hunting a cow in late season after, especially in District 4, people have been hunting that September bull, October bull.
Yeah.
That's the issue. And of course, even when you go in the woods after a moose, that provides. We could get into that, all the challenges that you guys know well. And then I would also have to say that, Maine has the Maine Moose Hunt, the lottery, and I don't have to tell you guys, I'm sure you have all your own thoughts on what that looks like and how that's been since the beginning of this in 1980. But it's a different beast.
Yeah, they should have been given more permits.
Yeah, and it's a different beast than
line.
other states, right? And so people, you start to increase permits, and we've really seen that people's comfort level with that there's not a lot of tolerance, for what I would think we would biologically need. And so that's why
when you say people, you mean citizens' comfort level, like people in the state,
like the general public, because it's not about any one user group. It's what do people overall and we've done all kinds, especially in the last few years, that we do all kinds of surveys, human dimensions work. We've worked with the university. We've had a professional group, Responsive Management Inc., who does surveys all across the United States, ask people and take representative samples of these people to find out what do they think. And so we need, we don't do this by ourselves, meaning the department doesn't go, this is what we're going to do through hell or high water. We want to know what people want and what their comfort level is. So if we want to do something, and, the adaptive hunt came out of that because, as we've heard people say all kinds of things. Oh my God, they're doing this all across the north. And it's like, no, we're doing it in half of a management unit. And this is why we're doing it. And this is how it was thought out. And what's that comfort level, so to speak, and acceptance, public acceptance with doing what we've done to try to test whether we could lower that population through a general hunt to have some impact on the ticks.
Yeah, and really when you think about it, that where you chose to do it, which I'm sure all of it came into consideration, is, but one is there's no moose viewing going on up there from,
right.
It's not like you're doing this around Greenville, which I know that's the segment that gets so upset with the hunting part of it. You've got good density all around it, really. So to me, it
And we have
It makes sense.
we have landowners that are supportive of what we're doing,
right.
and that's a critical piece too.
Yep.
So what is the going back through? Let's say going back to 2014. In general, from your counts and the information you've gotten, what's the population done in general since 2014? Kind of on a graph, not that you can show a graph, but has it been down all the time, or?
Well, I think we realize that probably it's funny to say the turn of the century, but I think the data that we have would say that from 99, 2000 could have been the high point for moose across the state, real high point. And in fact, when we started our tick work in 2014 with UNH, they had done collared animals 10 years prior, so whatever that was, 2004. And then we tried to locate, based on all the other information we have, could we find years where there was probably a bad moose die-off from winter tick. And I'm not sure if we identified a time period in the 90s where we had seen that, but we started to see that in the 2000s. And that, again, you can look at our moose hunt and the harvest, and that has had very little impact on that moose population. But when you look at all this, like I said in the beginning here, you got to look at how many moose are being produced every year by cows, and then the survival not only of the cows their first 3 weeks of life, but in Maine, it's the first winter getting through the tick vortex. And so I think we've had this thing where we've had slow declines since then, and then you'll get a bump up, and then it'll start going slow again, and then bump up. People need to understand that a cow moose can live at least 20 years. She's probably productive through her early teens, maybe 13, 14. She's probably productive. And, a moose can be bred if it's a year and a half old. If it's got to weigh over 440 pounds. It's got to be a big one. But usually it's by the time they're 2.5, we're getting high pregnancy rates, and they're dropping a calf. But what's happened, and we believe it's the implications are from the number of moose we've had on the landscape for the last 30 plus years or more, and then the tick being out there, is that they're on the adult cow. They're not killing the cow, but she's getting fed on, so her condition is poor. And what happens in this scenario, and Quebec did research on this, is you can be an adult cow that's pregnant in very poor condition, and you'll still give birth to a calf. Now that calf gets dropped on the ground, and it may be underweight, and she may have trouble lactating. The calf may have trouble feeding, and then it's dead within 48 hours.
Right.
The other thing that happens, which is also a byproduct of winter ticks and its impact on the cow's health, is that our twinning rates have dropped by about half since the mid to late 80s. That's the last time we have data on that. So we collected that information from 85 to 89. So that's my only comparison in time. So we have less twins happening.
Why do you think that is?
Well, that has to do, it's all about, for a cow to ovulate, and then whether she can have one or two, it's all about her mass. You got to be a big cow, and then you have to be in the type of condition going into that winter from your fall where you got lots of fat on you and you're good shape because you're feeding that fetus until May. And so she might have, we've had captured animals that have twins, and then you go and one of the calves dies, and then a month later the other one's dead from tick. And so ticks, and just all of that blood loss, and then all the other things that it causes a moose to do, it'll cause restlessness. It'll basically cause them to not be doing what they should be doing, which is feeding a little bit, ruminating, chilling out. It agitates them is what it's doing, and that becomes a real problem. And Rick was saying this before. There are stress hormones and things in these animals that are also problematic, and so that's changed things. And you can do that. I've done all the numbers, comparing what that means when you have these lower calf rates and all this, and that really can hamper your population.
Right.
And what do you think the population is now?
Don't know. Yeah. The last time we did a full court press was in 2012. Everybody thought I was crazy. It was a really fun time to be a biologist. You know, we I kind of talked about this a little bit in the Hunting ME film, but you know, again, this goes back to, you know, my friend used to say, it's not rocket science, it's harder, you know, and counting moose or whatever. And we had on our website for years, and again, no fault of anybody. We had like a population, I always forget whether it was 23 or 29, and it was on the website every year. And of course, this was years ago, you know, and now we have people who do this and can change, you know, information in a minute. And so when we started doing the helicopter surveys, we made a little change there. First we started with deer. We discovered that deer stand still. And anyways, we went on to moose. Moose came out pretty good. So then we did a full core press. And of there's basically 12 management units in my mind that comprise the bulk, the core range of moose in the state. And you all know what that is, which is basically zones 1 through 11 and then District 19. And it's not that's not rocket science. It's all commercial forest land. So we did a full core press, flew as many of them as we can. We could not fly District 8 because of the topography. You can't take a helicopter loaded with fuel and 4 dudes and fly a transect, and you're supposed to go over, you know, Johnson Mountain, and you just can't. You can't do that. So we tried to think of other ways, and we couldn't fly District 7. Yeah, we couldn't. You know, Lee's looking at me like, yeah, that's probably the other one. Yeah, you can't fly. You couldn't do that. You can't fly in a straight line. So what I did is we did estimates on all the other units. We didn't do District 10. We did some extrapolation, and then I came up with an estimate based on that without even the peripheral ones. And that estimate in 2012, I think, was like 76,000 moose plus or minus, you know, 10 or 20 or something like that, right? And then people flipped out, like, you know, they didn't believe that because, you know, it was an interesting time, right? Because number one, you know, some of us we live partially in the past. People remember the bigger clear cuts, the rolling, you know, the post budworm and all this. And, you know, you go up in the woods now and, you know, how far can you see? You know, it depends where you are. In some places you can't see anywhere. Yeah. And yet there's moose country. You roll down the Golden Road. I had a bull moose last week come across my windshield. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what the, you know, because I just didn't expect it there. And of course you can't see much on that, but there's tons and tons of moose habitat in there. So we came out there with this estimate. You know, people thought I was crazy. That's fine. But it was the best thing going. And since then, you know, I would think that it's decreased quite a bit, but I don't know what that number is. And I when I'm flying these surveys, you know, we basically do a 5-year rotation. So if we sit there and we go fly, you know, District 9 and do transects in 9, it's going to be another 5 years till we get back there because, you know, you cannot. In a good year, this is going to sound really pathetic, but in a good year with the conditions and everything else, if I could do 8 surveys, I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. In fact, I do 1 survey and we get on the ground. I'm like, all right, we got that done. So,
yeah. So you brought that up about habitat and all that. So I think you think back, you know, people nowadays think we always had a giant moose population in Maine, which wasn't true because back, I can remember my grandfather said there was almost no moose in the 40s and 50s, correct?
Right, yeah.
So then we went into the cable. Back then it was horses that you logged with, okay? Yeah. So you had very little logging. Then it evolved into cable skidders. So the clear cuts got a little bigger, but not much. If a guy cut 100 acres the entire winter, that was huge. Yeah. Then it went into mechanical equipment. So we're cutting 100 acres in a week. Yeah. And that's when the moose population, you know, went skyrocketed in Maine. Yeah. But that also created tick habitat because perfect tick habitat is low brush. Yeah. Correct? Yeah. And so we had the best of both, and then they merged together.
Yeah, and then having a shorter winter is the real kicker. And yes. And then you know, the other thing that's a part of this equation with all the crazy things with how our weather is that, you know, like in this March when we were out in the woods, and you probably remember this, is that, you know, we were up in District 4 on a mortality, and we had 4 feet of snow, which, you know, for a 400-pound calf in March, that also is going to push you down further, right? Especially if you're a smaller one. Yeah. And if you're under 400, and you got ticks on you and you're going through 4 feet of snow, you're probably dead.
Yeah, you can make it.
And then in the next 2 weeks, we started to rapidly lose snow. So even with the craziness with the weather is that our winters are shorter, and that impacts the number of ticks are out there. But we can still have areas where you have enough snow that energetically it's difficult for those smaller animals to get through that. And that can be bad. And we saw that quite a bit in the Quebec numbers up there because they get that much more snow than us.
Right.
So
I heard something recently, and I'm interested to get your opinion on it. Someone said that a moose is built for the winter and can handle the cold. The cold's not as bad as the heat in the summer on them, that they stress worse because of the heat. Is there any truth to that?
oh man, you're going to get me really in hot water here. But moose, I mean, the heat thing is something that we do have researchers out there who it's a controversial thing because some of the work that was done on this heat stress were done on captive moose originally. And of course, a wild moose does all kinds of things to deal with dissipating heat when it's hot and muggy out there. And the biggest thing that moose do, contrary, this is my professional opinion, people will hate me for this, but moose go into the water because there's aquatic vegetation that has high sodium in there, and they can just eat the hell out of it. They don't go out there, in my opinion, and they're not going in there because they're chased by bugs, and they're not going in there to cool off. Those are obviously added benefits, right? But they're in there for the food.
For the food.
And where does the moose go after that? They go back in the woods. And where do they go? They go in shady areas. And you've seen this before. They lie down like your dog does. And the more surface area you can get on the cool ground, the easier you are to cool down.
Yep.
And so when people say they don't see moose and stuff, I always have these anecdotes because, not only have we done lots of work in the water in the summertime and all this, but we used to walk in and sneak in on moose. You guys would have been awesome for this work, where we'd have the telemetry and we try to go in on the cow without being detected to see if she has a calf and then get out of there so she doesn't know. But we'd go in there and we'd see these moose lying there like dogs, just like cooling out. I was picking up a caller up off Birch Brook, is it? Anyways, or the Birch River up in near Deboulay. And I always play this game, which is I park my truck and I take a GPS point and I say truck. That's where my truck is. I shut it off and then I'm going in there to find the collar. I went into this to get this collar and it was so thick in there. If I was standing here with you, I'd be like, Joe. And it's like the collar's right here. And it's like, man, I wish I had a machete. And I couldn't even tell where the moose went through. And there's the collar. Wow. So I pick up the collar and then I'm like, all right, the trucks are there. And I get out my GPS and compass, and it's like, no, the truck is there. I have no idea where I am. But the point is, it's so thick in there and so higher than a moose that you would never see a moose.
Yeah.
And, all these things about seeing moose always make my buddies, I took my buddies down the Allagash in May. We like to do an early preseason trip there. And they were like, are we going to see some moose? And I go, no, you're not going to see any moose. What do you mean? Well, they're calving, so usually when you see two animals together, that's easier than one visually. And so cows and calves, they kind of sequester themselves, right? We know that cows in the springtime work an area, and then when they're getting ready to calve, they make a calf movement. So they beeline someplace that's more protected. They have their calf there, spend a day, get that calf cleaned up, and then they're out of there. And so there's a strategic way of doing that. So, I was telling them, no, we're not going to see any moose. No.
A lot of good information there,
Sorry,
actually.
I went off on a whole tangent.
No, that's all right.
No, it's good.
That's why we have you here.
Really good.
We like those tangents. But so the lottery's coming up soon. Some will listen to this before the lottery, some just after. But you going to be over there?
No.
You answered that one quick.
I will be in Sweden.
Nice.
Studying moose?
I will be at the International Moose Symposium in Sweden. Yeah.
Nice.
Are we gonna be able to hunt them with dogs next
And
year?
I'll be
Lee?
talking about Maine.
Yeah.
Nice.
Excellent.
No, I'm excited to go there because I'm staying with my friend Jonas, who is a wildlife moose veterinarian and really involved in the hunting part as well. Of course, he's an avid hunter, but I'm trying to understand that whole thing out there. And he actually has written a book on moose hygiene, which I believe you can sell the meat there, but you have to get, licensed, right?
Yeah, to
because
do
it
it,
has
yeah.
to be hygienic. And so he and I joke all the time, and we're just both the same jokesters. And I said, I go, we could use that book here. And he goes, well, let's translate it. Well, so we have a lot to talk about, he and I, about this.
Nice.
Yeah, I watched those videos of the way they hunt
Yeah.
over there. It's pretty interesting. We would
Very different.
slaughter them here.
Very different, yeah.
And I'm glad
I
we don't
watched
have
one
it.
of them the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I happened to see one.
So yeah, the
Lottery.
lottery's always a fun day. We're going to be over there. Are you going to be there too, Lee?
Yeah, I'll be there.
What's the date on that?
10th.
21st.
21st. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a week from the Saturday.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, and if you are lucky enough to draw, Lake Parlin Outfitters will be guiding as usual. After we just talked about how the moose herd is, but
That's it. That's all we get is Lake Parlin. We don't get True North will be guiding. We don't.
yeah. Well, you didn't let me get there.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I was going to actually ask you that. Are you guiding?
Yeah, we're going to take on a couple clients. I don't,
Okay,
we don't
nice.
have the guides that you have, but eventually they'll
You could always come over.
Yeah, I could. I'll just show
I bet
up.
you could find them.
Yeah, I think we're going to have good luck finding some good guides. But
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be in Wyoming and Colorado elk hunting. I drew 2 tags, so
Wow.
Yeah.
yeah.
Nice.
But yeah,
That's the life.
it's you always, as an outfitter and hunting guide, obviously we have a huge interest in the health of the herd, and if the state came out, if you guys said, hey, we found that we got to close the season down for 5 years, I'd be all for it.
Yeah.
I'm kind
Nothing we could. I wouldn't even argue the point. If Lee Kantar said we got to shut it down for 5 years, we got to shut it down. But you're right.
but as long as there's a hunt going on, we're going to be hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these are the questions that we get.
That'd be
from-
very counterproductive.
Yeah. We get those questions from our clients, though. That's all they ask us while we're hunting.
Yeah.
But-
How do you kill the ticks? Can we paintball them? Can
Yeah,
we blow them
constantly.
up?
Yeah. Everybody's got a theory.
Or an
Right,
opinion.
So I really think Lee cleared up a lot of these theories and opinions today.
Right. Yeah,
in my
for the
opinion.
people that will listen to this
Exactly.
podcast, they'll
Yeah.
hopefully be educated,
Yeah.
So
Nice.
so you just said it would be counterproductive.
Yeah,
Explain that.
not having a hunt.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it's challenging enough over the years you can look back at all of our information where we had very limited cow hunting. And, first, with all these public surveys, they're always asking the first thing to everybody, whether you're a hunter or not, do you approve of moose hunting in Maine? And the state of Maine has an outstanding record with hunters, non-hunters alike, approve of moose hunting way more than not approving. That's huge, right?
Yeah.
Non-hunters.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
'Cause they're
fine.
delicious.
That's fine. Yeah. So that's kind of the start of that whole conversation. But you can't think about winter tick or management at all, period, without talking about the female segment and hunting the female segment. You can't have a bull only hunt. It doesn't make any sense. And obviously,
It's part of the management tool.
Yeah,
It really is. Yeah.
Yep, and
It's a balance.
we've obviously seen this with deer. Now, deer are very different, but you've seen that, we've been very fortunate in the state of Maine compared to the other states where we've, for a long time, been able to kind of keep the lid on the deer numbers. But as the winters have been more moderate and whatever, you look at the permit numbers we have for deer this year and the take that you could, it's phenomenal. If you love deer hunting,
Yeah. There's a ton of deer. around.
pretty much glory days.
Yeah.
Whether you're a big buck hunter or a meat hunter or both. Yeah.
You're gonna come back and talk deer hunting with us next time.
I'm crazy. I don't know. Not crazy like you guys. Just a little different crazy, but
That's crazy.
Excellent. Well, I really enjoyed that, Lee. I appreciate you making the drive up.
Yeah.
yeah, anytime.
And,
That was a really good one.
So
There's a few other things. I was looking for an email. I hope people
Okay.
don't think I was looking for a text message or whatever. But
No.
I got an email from somebody at IF&W that had some good points because we were talking about different things. But hunting licenses are way up in the state of Maine. Trapping licenses are up in the state of Maine. There's a lot of
Sales, you mean?
Sales, yeah,
Sale.
you know,
Okay,
for
yeah.
hunting and fishing license.
Not cost.
Huh?
Not cost, but sales.
No, not cost. but
Right.
yeah, the sales of hunting licenses and trapping licenses are all up.
Yeah.
When the nation right now is actually going backwards a little bit. The
Yeah.
state of Maine is.
I find that
This is
hard.
way
I
ahead.
really find that hard to believe, though. I think that's a lot of political stuff because I put in for a lot of states, you know, to try to draw, right? And every single year, they call it a point creep. So every single year, every state is getting tougher and tougher and tougher. So that tells me there's more people putting in. Otherwise, it would be easier if there was less because they got a quota for, you know, every unit, every district on animals.
But it could be also the places you're putting in for are the most desirable places because you're talking specifically usually about elk, right?
Yeah, well, you're not going.
No,
you're not
no.
going to Oklahoma to
Elk,
you know,
mule deer, and
I
whitetail.
know.
Well,
All
and of
three.
course they had those.
And
they-
you're always hitting the right zones. Like
They had some-
Colorado, that zone 41 is hard to get in.
Yeah, I drew zone 6.
So going back, they were saying that the main
Yeah,
numbers are up.
license sales for every sport as far as outdoor activities are up.
Yeah.
So I wish I had it because I'd read it to you. But
What's amazing to me is that, you know, of course, I did my grad work out in New Mexico, Colorado, and worked in Washington State as a wildlife biologist. And I've been on one elk hunt in New Mexico. Had no idea what I was doing back then. But so anyways, I love that. But it's amazing to look at other states from a non-resident's point of view and compare that to opportunities in Maine. So like I was talking to a guy last year who was moose hunting here. He's from North Dakota. And he was a resident, and he's just like, it's almost like impossible to get a tag
As a resident?
As a resident,
really,
and then you have some places where non-resident, forget it, man.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Yeah.
you're out of luck.
Yeah.
And so you know, in the Northeast, right, when you're talking about licenses and everything, I mean, I don't know how our non-resident stuff's doing, but man, we got a lot of opportunity. I feel like we do. I mean,
absolutely.
It's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
As a hunter, it's like. It's very exciting, but
Well, it's really what the true north is all about, right?
Right.
Like it's the lifestyle up here where we live, and
Yeah, it's
and
just a constant season. You know, it goes from one to the next here for a resident.
I'm
you
in
know.
that work season right now, Rick, and I can't wait for the last day.
We all are.
You going down to hunt stock? Have you ever been?
So John with Hunting ME has been trying to get me to go down there.
Come on down.
so Yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
Tents and
So
a lot
yeah.
of fun.
I might do that.
Yeah.
You know.
There's gonna be a lot of new people there this year
Yeah.
for speakers and seminars and stuff.
Yeah, it's August 7th, 8th, and 9th. You can buy your tickets ahead of time. Use promo code TTN for a 10% discount. And also support our channel if you could. Like and subscribe. It all helps us out. We're having a lot of fun doing this, and we've got a lot of support. It's been growing really fast. Facebook and Instagram and all that. So we appreciate all the support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try not to miss any more podcasts. But
Well, you're going to miss the next one with Jeff, which we already talked about, but it's an
Right.
excused absence. So,
right.
so
I got to tell
anyone that missed Lee last time
right.
Yeah, if you
and
could
was
miss
upset
Lee.
about it because there were a few people
So
that were upset.
did you oversleep last time? What
I
happened?
forgot all about it. I'm in
Oh.
my office talking, and Cody looks at me and he goes, "Dude, didn't you have a podcast today?" And it's like 1:00, and I'm like, "Oh man, I'm dead."
Well,
And then Joe called.
We gave you the
"Hey,
pass."
yeah. So now it's we call him the night before, like he's a
Yeah.
teenager late for school.
Like I'm
can't
an old
get up.
man. Can't remember shit.
But anyway, he is going to be gone on the next one, which is Jeff. Jeff is going to be sitting down with us on that one.
Oh,
But
good.
I'm sure we'll be all
Yeah.
set there.
I'll think something up to ride Jeff about then.
Yeah. So.
I got to tell a quick little story.
Yeah.
Just a short one. So I drove down. This guy called me the other day, and his name's John, young fella, probably in his early 30s, and his bridge was collapsing that I put in 35 years ago. We built a bridge out
Shoddy work.
of telephone poles, yeah. And so anyway, he says we need to fix the bridge. So I drive down, and the minute I drive down, they were waiting on the bridge, him and his mother, and he goes, "It is you." He looks at my plate, says Buck Tracker on my truck, right? And he goes, "It is you." He goes, You're the guy on the YouTube, Rick Labby." And I go, yeah, that's me. And he goes, "I shot my first 200-pound buck last year by watching all your videos." And he goes, "You actually taught me how to track a deer." And I just thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that is
so
cool. I would have liked it if
all you
said
gotta do
I
is
shot
watch-
my first 200-pound buck sitting in your tree stand.
Yeah.
That would have been funny.
sitting in my tree.
Yeah. You know.
So all you got to do is watch a YouTube video.
Yeah.
I shot that buck last year, 206 he weighed, and the first time I've sat in a tree stand in Maine in 17 years.
No kidding.
Only because we didn't have snow.
Yeah. It is. I mean, a lot of people sit in tree stands for a long period of time and have great success.
It was really dry, okay?
Yeah.
And it was either drive up north, which is like a needle in a haystack up here. Anybody knows if you don't have snow on the ground, your chances of seeing a big buck are 0.
Right.
And or try to go kill a deer where I thought I knew where he was going to be the next morning, and basically second guessed him. So that's what I did.
I think I'm going to take up archery hunting again this year and start shooting.
Good.
just
I'm glad to
for
hear that.
more, it's just another opportunity, another excuse to get in the woods.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
Be more like me. You'll hunt muzzleloader, archery, rifle, everything.
I do like my muzzleloader. I just
Well, now that we
hate to
can
wait
kill
till the
two.
last week. Yeah.
If we get the doe tag, we can kill 2. So that's a nice little benefit. Kill that doe with a bow.
Yeah.
What's your preferred method for deer hunting? What area do you hunt?
Well, don't hate me, but my buddy gave me his dad's crossbow several years ago.
Yeah, I hunt with a crossbow.
Yeah.
I love it.
And it's just, it's funny because when you guys are talking, I was thinking, so last year, I got a friend who lives right he's in expanded archery, and he's got a nice piece of property, and he's next to a land trust. And so I got permission from the land trust, which was interesting because they wanted my ID and like photocopied everything. And and I'm fine because if you're the landowner, I'll do whatever you want me to do. You know, you tell me. But they also require you to take the whole deer out. So I'm sitting there going, I'm one of those people where it's like, I'm happy to do whatever you want me to do as a landowner, but all you guys, you got to play the same game as me.
Right.
And I'm not. But the funny thing is, I was just thinking when you guys are talking. So every time I was in there and trying to set up in a place, I'd be like, I'm going to go over there. And as soon as I go over there, there's a tree stand.
Right.
So it's like I wasn't hunting deer, I was hunting tree stands. And then I came back one time. We got some snow, and I wanted to pull in there just for fun because it's a pretty big piece of property. And I found a blood trail. So I tracked the blood trail, and there's hiking trails in there. And this guy had killed a buck and hung its nutsack on the tree, and it was right in the distance of the hiking trail. And I found the gut pile, and I'm like, this dude didn't play by the rules, because I'm thinking I'll just do a gutless method, and then take the encased rib cage out on my sled and do what they ask. I also don't, they have my name, so it'd be like, Anyways, I don't know. I like, just like you said, Lee, which is, I like the opportunity. Like I love to hunt, and that adds things. Last year I killed my buck really early in the season, October, and you'll laugh at this too. And I thank my friend John Altman here if he ever listens to this. But John and I had been talking about tree stands, and I don't like being up high, and I can tell you other stories about just not good for me. So John says to me, you don't have to be up high, it all depends. You don't have to do that. Take my gear and try it out. So I take his gear back to my house, rig myself up. I get some experience with climbing harnesses and ropes, put the tree stand a foot above the ground, get to the point where I'm like, all right, man. And I'm just like, I'm just so, and I got this property I'm hunting on that's just deer. So the first day I went up there, I actually sat on, I have this Fjallraven pack. This is not an advertisement, Fjallraven, even though there's some good stuff. And you sit on the pack. So the first day, dumb mistake, right? I'm on this old logging road. You can't drive in there. You got to hike in there. It's up this mountain. And I'm 10 yards off the logging road, just 10 yards with my crossbow. And I go like this. I go, oh, shit, there's a buck. I can't believe there's a buck. Like, I'm seeing antlers. And then I look at him again. And I go, oh, my God, it's like a monster. And so all he has to do is clear this tree. And I got my crossbow up like this. And this is the mistake I made. I think this is the mistake, which is he was just about to clear it, and I went like this. That's all I did. And as soon as his head came, he just looked at me in that split second and flew.
How far was he from you?
10 yards.
Oh man.
Cool
And
he
experience.
and then of course he ran and then stopped, and he was about 50 yards from me. Couldn't see his head, so I can't tell you what he looked like, except he was. And I'm not going to shoot. I mean, my limit's 30 yards with my crossbow. So then I came back and I was up the hill even more, and I hung my stand, put that in another stupid spot, moved that, and I'm like, all right. And then just had a great day where, you know, I had a bunch of deer running down off the mountain, and this guy came and I saw him, and it was just awesome.
Cool.
But I'll hunt till right up to the end of muzzleloader. And
yeah, I shot my elk last year with my crossbow, and the year before.
you did, yeah.
Yeah,
Really?
Wyoming. Yeah, 86 yards.
I was going to
Oh
say
my
the only
God,
thing
yeah.
that jumped out at me about that statement was the fact that your limit's 30 yards with a crossbow.
Yeah,
I thought the whole idea was that you could.
yeah.
Well, you can.
Shoot
It's
further.
just
I can one
Correct.
time. Well, I mean, maybe it sounds stupid to you guys, but I mean, it is what it is with me. It's like, you
No,
know,
I know. Everyone's-
I could
everyone
get
shoots
I could
what they
get it to
want.
35, and that with my crossbow set up, you can see that, and I'm like, that's not what you want.
right.
You want it,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
yeah.
And you know, I'm also like, I like who's the famous writer? I shouldn't even say this to you guys, but who was the famous writer who just retired from Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation? He does all the gun stuff. Wayne Van Zwol. You ever
Yeah,
read
yeah,
this stuff?
Wayne. Yeah, yeah.
Amazing stuff. But
Yeah.
Wayne once said regarding shooting long distances, it's, you know, he basically, to paraphrase him, he said, you might just want to get closer to the deer. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, which you guys do all the time, but yeah.
No,
I mean,
not all.
I was going to say, you keep throwing
I've
these
seen-
things out. It's,
I've sent some. I've sent some arrows 80 yards,
yeah.
and they definitely got an arch to them.
Yeah.
But
the old rainbow.
I feel pretty
throw.
comfortable though. You know, I got the Raven 20, and that's 430 feet per second. I think I I shot it through my seismic, and so that shoots pretty flat, and I'm pretty confident out to like 95 yards with that thing.
really,
Yeah, but you got to be like hunting Arizona in the cactus. You're in a
Right.
wide open desert.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
You know, when I started hunting out there like 7-8 years ago with a bow, then I tore my shoulder snowmobiling in Wyoming, so I switched
With
to
me.
the crossbow. Yeah, with you. Yeah, thanks, Lee. So, anyway, but I love that crossbow. It's
I was shooting just for practice. I was shooting 80 yards with my bow before my moose hunt, knowing that like 45 was pretty much my limit where I wanted to shoot, and that's what I ended up shooting my moose at, was 45. But if you shoot it like 60 to 80, and
yeah,
and I mean, I'm not putting them in there super tight at that range, but it's good practice because then a moose seems like a small target at 40.
yeah.
yeah.
But
Well, I'm so dumb. I shot both deer last year within 15 and 18 yards, and the doe I shot was with my rifle 708, and I didn't like the way it exited. So now I'm thinking revolver.
that'd be
I
fun.
mean, if I'm that close,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
right. I mean,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like I don't want to ruin meat, but
I've never shot a deer with
Yeah.
a revolver.
no,
No.
There you go.
Yeah. New challenge, right?
Yeah.
New challenge.
just
Well-
like to get out there.
Yeah.
That was fun. Lee, again, I really
Yes.
appreciate you coming all the way up
Sure.
here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was really informative.
Yeah. Very informative.
So
Yeah,
looking
good
forward
talking.
to seeing everyone at the lottery.
Moose Lottery. Yeah, that'll
be
be fun.
Yeah. Also, I want to throw in June 28th. We got the Sportsman Challenge put on by Pine Grove Lodge, and which is for veterans and offices, everything all over the whole state, and that's coming up June 28th. It's going to be in Pittsfield at the golf course. It goes from 9 to 5. Lanny Benoit's going to be there. Timmy Baldick, myself, Randy Flannery, a few other speakers, and the True North's going to be there. My buddy Brian Ross is bringing the Hill Gould buck, and the Hill Gould buck actually left the state of Maine 40 years ago and got sold. So this is the first public appearance, other than being at my place last year, that the Hill Gould buck is going to be on display. So I urge everybody to come to the Sportsman Challenge and see the Hill Gould buck. And this isn't a replica. This is the real deal. And he's also has the Silver Ridge buck, which is one of the most iconic bucks ever killed in the state of Maine. And he's, I think, bringing about 6 other trophies that are just giants.
Oh.
I mean, the beams are as big as my arms. that all State of Maine deer. So it's going to
Cool.
be quite a sight to see. Those are going to be hung on the porch for everybody to see, and I think it's going to be. And the whole Sportsman Challenge, what it is, it's a bunch of multiple events. It's I can't think of them all, but it's axe throwing, I think archery shooting, fishing, fly casting, clay pigeon shooting. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So the guy that comes out with the top score out of all those gets the number one sportsman for Maine.
Nice.
So yeah, it's gonna be a fun
I
day.
saw that. That
Awesome.
looks interesting.
Yeah. So I hope to see everybody there.
I'll be. You going over, Lee?
I might.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I'll be there.
Yeah,
So-
you should. I might drag you over.
All right.
I'm not
Yeah.
good at axe throwing, so.
So till next time, folks, shoot straight.